Hey everyone, it's Mrs. Womack again, and today's lesson is over modifying phrases. Now, in order to understand today's lesson, it's really important that you have watched the video on adjectives and adverbs as modifiers already before seeing this one. So if you haven't, go ahead and stop now and go back to that video before this will make a lot of sense to you. Both of the videos go hand in hand, and they're both relatively short, but it really is important that you watch the adjective and adverb video first before this one. Modifying phrases are simply prepositional phrases that act as modifiers. In fact, that's what a prepositional phrase does. It acts as a modifier in a sentence. And since it's acting as a modifier, that means that prepositional phrases act as either adjectives or adverbs. Let's look at an example sentence to understand this. Now, before we can find the prepositional phrase, we need to identify the preposition. If you are not familiar with your prepositions, now might be a good time to pause the video and to do a little bit of research. You may even want to make a list of the common prepositions to help you along as we go through this lesson. In this sentence, the preposition is next to and will be boxed in purple. Now, by definition, prepositions begin a prepositional phrase that will consist of a preposition at the beginning and an object at the end. In this sentence, next to me is the entire prepositional phrase, and we notate that by underlining it. Me is the noun or the pronoun, in this case a pronoun, that is ending the phrase, and so it is acting as the object of the preposition, so we will label it OP. Since this phrase, next to me, is modifying the noun boy and is answering the question, which one, it is acting as an adjective, and we call it an adjective phrase. Now let's look at the diagramming of these kinds of phrases. We begin by identifying the main parts of the sentence as we have done previously. The verb in the sentence is the word is, and it is a linking verb. We will find the subject by asking the question, who or what is? And in this sentence, the word is boy. Since boy is a noun, we will box it in red and label it S as its function. With a linking verb, we are looking for predicate adjectives or predicate nominatives by asking the question, is whom or what? Well, in this sentence, the answer is brother. And brother is a noun, so we will label it predicate nominative since it is a noun. Now, as I said in our lesson on adjectives and adverbs, once you identify the main parts of the sentence, everything else in the sentence is going to be acting as a modifier of some sort. So let's look. We have the word the here, which is an article adjective, modifying the word boy by telling me which one. We also have the possessive pronoun my, that is acting as an adjective because it's answering the question, which one, about brother. In fact, all possessive nouns and pronouns will act as adjectives. We've already identified the prepositional phrase, so now let's go on to the diagram. We begin with the typical horizontal line and the subject-predicate division that we see as an identification of a clause. Because in this clause we have a linking verb, we will need to put in the predicate the backward slant that separates the linking verb from the predicate adjective or predicate nominative. So we will put in the subject, the verb, and in this sentence the predicate nominative brother. Now, as we saw in the lesson on adjectives and adverbs, we're going to dangle our modifiers from the words they are modifying. So we will have the dangling from boy and my dangling from brother. Now on to the prepositional phrase. Now, prepositional phrases, because they're acting as modifiers, will also need to dangle from the word they are modifying. In this case, boy. However, it is slightly different than just a regular old adjective or adverb. First, we must dangle the preposition on the slanting line. Then, at the bottom of the slant, we will add a horizontal line in which to put the object of the preposition. And that's really all there is to it. Let's look at another example. The tree in my yard leans dangerously. The verb in this sentence is leans, and leans is an action verb. So we will find the subject. Who or what leans? In this case, the answer is tree. Tree is a noun, and we will label its function as the subject in the sentence. Because we have an action verb, we must look for a direct object. Leans, whom or what? Well, in this sentence, we really don't have an answer for that question. So we're just going to put an X in it and move on. Now that we found the main parts of the sentence, everything else in the sentence is going to modify something else in the sentence. So starting from left to right, the, we said previously, is an article adjective. In this sentence, it's modifying tree by telling me which tree. Well, the tree. Immediately following tree, we have the preposition in. In is the beginning of the prepositional phrase, in my yard. Yard is acting as the object of the preposition, since it is the noun at the end of the phrase. Now within this phrase, we have an additional word. It is the modifier for the object of the preposition. And last but not least, we have the word dangerously. That is telling me how the tree is leaning. Therefore, it is acting as an adverb modifier for the verb leans. When we go to diagram this, we have just a subject and verb in our main clause. The rest is modifiers. So we have the word the, modifying tree, adverb dangerously, modifying leans. And then let's look at the preposition. We have to make our dangle for our preposition, which is in, our horizontal at the end of the slant for our object. And because the word my is modifying yard, we will need to dangle it from yard. And that is how you diagram a sentence that contains a prepositional phrase with a modifier for the object. This is really a formula, and they will all act in the same way. Modifying phrases will always dangle from either a noun or a verb or a pronoun or a modifier. I hope you have gotten a little bit of an insight into how to diagram modifying phrases. Our next lesson will be modifying clauses, which we also call dependent clauses, and they're a little bit trickier, so that will take a little bit more understanding. So get comfortable with modifying with modifiers and modifying phrases before moving on to modifying clauses. Until then, have a great day.